let me try and make the case for coping mechanisms as a means to deal with the inner turmoil that might arise within you as a result of some external stressful situation. Coping mechanisms get a bad rap, and perhaps in some cases deservedly so. They get a bad rap because they imply that you're weak. There's negative connotations connected to it that imply weakness on behalf of the person who's merely coping. Because coping, that word, suggests that you only have just enough strength. You can only muster up just enough strength to cope with whatever situation caused this inner turmoil to emerge within you, as opposed to enough strength to successfully address the external situation and rid yourself or expel that inner turmoil for good. Okay? So I want to make the case for coping mechanisms, choosing superior coping mechanisms. And of course, if you're to choose a superior coping mechanism, there must be inferior coping mechanisms. And the main inferior coping mechanism in our sick society is alcohol. We'll go into that. But first, let's just go through an example. So say you're in work and you encounter a stressful situation. Your boss is just yelling at you and you're stressed out. Okay, this situation stimulates within you the emergence of inner turmoil. And that feels shit. It feels terrible. That inner turmoil, it's actually real. Like you can feel it in your abdomen, here, in your chest. Well, at least I do. I feel it in my abdomen and chest. So this external situation stimulates internal turmoil. You may be a person who, to cope with this, resorts to alcohol. So you go ahead and drown your sorrows. Or you may be a person who chooses to bake yourself alive in the sauna to deal with this inner turmoil. Or you may be perhaps a more peaceable human being who draws themselves a lavender infused bath and then just sits completely immersed in that hot water for who knows, however long you need to successfully expel yourself of the inner turmoil. These three are just examples of coping mechanisms. Nothing implied. Just look at them for what they are, objectively. Just coping mechanisms. There's an action in the real world which is interpreted through your consciousness, stimulates an internal response, and that internal response then determines subsequent behavior. You know, and that subsequent behavior is one of those three: drowning sorrows, baking yourself alive in the sauna, or immersing yourself in a lavender infused bath. It's simple as. And these are just means by which to deal with the inner turmoil that emerged as a result of a stressful external situation. So now let's get into some nuance. If it be the case that alcohol is a superior coping mechanism, and by superior coping mechanism I mean a coping mechanism which does not deserve the negative connotations that the term coping mechanism will have people think about in the popular sense of the term. If alcohol truly facilitated your successfully dealing with the external situation that caused this inner turmoil, if you're the type of person to sit down, say just alone, with a brandy or a whiskey, whatever your drink of choice is, and you're drinking away and you're thinking about what happened, and through your thinking about what happened you determine a course of action that will successfully expel this inner turmoil and have you deal with the external situation that stimulated that inner turmoil, then alcohol is a superior coping mechanism for you. But I wager, for the most part, in our sick society, people resort to alcohol because it is so ubiquitous, so readily available, that it is the path of least resistance for dealing with these stressful situations is alcohol. And I think alcohol is just a temporary relief from the pain caused by that inner turmoil and that external stressful situation. But that ultimately, in the long term, it does nothing to solve it. And you will simply, in life, and this can happen across the entirety of a lifetime, you will simply expose yourself to rounds of ups and downs. So your ups are when you're drunk and you're in an alcohol-induced state of consciousness, and your downs are your state of sobriety. And come on, that's no way to live. That's a shocking bad way to live. So alcohol is it temporarily numbs your sensitivity to the inner turmoil, which makes you think that you've solved the problem. In your drunken state, you think that. But in reality, in your sobriety, in your sober state, you haven't. And even, it could get even worse. Like your drunken state, you have these thoughts that push you towards self-deception in sobriety. And so you're trying to tell yourself, oh yeah, no, actually all's good. Like, I can just go to alcohol to feel good, and like, sobriety, it's not too bad, it's actually okay. So, just steer clear. I think that alcohol, as a coping mechanism, is the worst. But like, of course, you can enjoy an alcoholic beverage. If you're not using it as a coping mechanism, just get drunk, get pissed. Who cares? Superior coping mechanisms exist, and the idea is to construct the path of least resistance towards these superior coping mechanisms. So firstly, you need to actually identify those potential avenues through which you might successfully deal with this inner turmoil. And that takes active work. You're going to have to apply yourself and work towards this, and that also requires brutal honesty with yourself, that you actually want to rid yourself of this inner turmoil. Because some people thrive on it, and some people, they get a sense of entitlement off of it, and they feel like their self-pity is a good way to live. And that's just disgusting. Just don't become that person. Please, please don't become that person. Firstly, you just have to become brutally honest and say, I do want to rid myself of this inner turmoil. Secondly, actively work towards finding those alternative potential avenues through which you might expel yourself of this inner turmoil. And that means those alternative potential avenues, as you avail yourself of those options, you think about what happened and what caused this inner turmoil, and you think about ways to deal with it in the real world, in the external world, so that this inner turmoil does not emerge again. And it means you have to become a bit of a dangerous human, because you have to be able to say, no, I don't want that. And you have to go out and let those people know, say your boss who yelled at you, let him or her know, hey, I'm not up for that, like, don't do that to me again. And then deal with the consequences that come as a result. Maybe your boss says, oh, I respect you for being able to stand up for yourself like that. Or maybe this, you're fired, you're done, bye. But you have to be, I'm not sure if dangerous is the word, but dangerous enough to deal with it. And then thirdly, you must construct the path of least resistance towards the alternative avenues through which you will expel this inner turmoil that you actively worked to find, so that in the stressful situation, it's easy to resort to them. It's as easy as the person who resorts to the temporary numbing of the pain through alcohol. They find that very easy. You, through your active work, will find resorting to these superior coping mechanism or potential avenues as easy as that. And that's possible, you can do it. And it's well worth it, well worth your time and effort. So we have only gone and reconfigured how we view coping mechanisms And now we see that there are inferior coping mechanisms, there are superior coping mechanisms, and there are ways and means by which you might improve your life by constructing the path of least resistance towards these superior coping mechanisms. Because we all have to cope. This sick society, well, you have to cope. If you don't have a coping mechanism for this sick society, I'm sorry, you simply have to cope. So just choose the superior options. That's it. Whoa!